Why You Wouldn't Last a Day in Medieval Times. Chapter 1. Mud, Blood, and Cabbage. Ethan Ward woke up to a rat licking his face. It stared at him with black, soulless eyes and didn't flinch when he screamed. His voice came out raw and dry, cracking halfway through as the rat scurried away, but not in fear. It moved with the indifference of a creature used to screaming. He sat up, spitting mud and something else. It was hard to tell what. Everything smelled like a compost pile had fornicated with a dying cow. His clothes were rough wool soaked through, and something alive seemed to be moving in the seams near his collarbone. Somewhere nearby a man coughed up what sounded like an entire lung. "Get up, Scab," someone barked. A boot connected with Ethan's side hard. He rolled and looked up at the shape looming over him. The man was tall, bald, and shirtless despite the cold. His skin was a web of scars and tattoos, not the clean, artistic kind, but prison scratchings and burns. His left eye was clouded white. The other was glaring. "You sleep past cockcrow again. I'll drag you to the reeve myself. What, where? Wrong answers." The man grabbed him by the front of the tunic and yanked him upright. "No talking. Shovels don't talk. Shovels, you dig shit today. Stable trench overflowed. Piss and horse water up to the knee. Hope you're taller than that." The man shoved a rusted shovel into Ethan's hands and walked away. Ethan looked down. His hands were bleeding. His fingernails were caked in something foul. His feet were wrapped in burlap sacks, soaked and freezing. He tried to remember where he was, how he got here, but the memories were a smear. There was something about a screen, a headset, a medieval simulation. Then someone screamed. He turned just in time to see a young boy, no older than 10, being dragged by 2 men in tattered robes toward a wooden platform. The child fought and kicked, shrieking in pure panic. "He's cursed," someone yelled. He breathed on the priest and the candles died. Witchcraft? No. That was real, wasn't it? Ethan staggered backward. The child was thrown into a cage. People clapped. Someone threw a handful of what looked like old entrails at the boy, and the crowd cheered. Ethan threw up into a ditch. Hours later, Ethan was standing knee-deep in liquid manure behind a crumbling stable, shoveling slurry into a wheelbarrow with a cracked axle. Flies buzzed thick around his face. He'd been bitten by 3 things he couldn't see, and one he could. A spider the size of a walnut had dropped from his sleeve. He tried talking to someone, a bent man named Orwick, who may or may not have spoken English. Orwick responded by handing him a cloth-wrapped object that turned out to be a pig's bladder full of something warm and suspiciously alcoholic. He drank. He regretted it immediately. By sundown, Ethan had learned several crucial things about medieval life. Soap existed, but no one used it. Water could not be trusted. Even the well was filled with things that twitched. People here died constantly. During his first day, 3 men and 1 mule collapsed and were casually carried off to the pit. His bed was a lice-infested straw mat next to a man named Thomlin, who had open sores and a cheerful attitude. "You'll get used to the itch," Thomlin said, scratching his armpit with a fork. Ethan cried himself to sleep. Chapter 2. The Inquisition Needs a Word. Ethan was dragged out of his lice nest before dawn. The bells had not yet rung. The village, or more accurately, the mud-encrusted cluster of hovels, surrounded by pigs and despair, was still asleep. But 2 men in long black robes stood over him, their faces lit by the flicker of a tallow candle. One had a wooden cross slung around his neck. The other held iron manacles. "You," the taller one said. "Stand." "I don't even know where I am," Ethan croaked. "Then it's worse than we feared," said the shorter one. They grabbed him. He was marched barefoot across frozen ground, past shuttered stalls and rats the size of cats. The village dogs followed, barking with anticipation. "Where are we going?" Ethan asked. No answer. They pushed him through a wooden door with rusty hinges and down stone steps slick with something unidentifiable. The air grew colder, wetter. The torchlight dimmed as they descended into what Ethan soon recognized, thanks to years of watching historical documentaries on YouTube, as a medieval interrogation chamber, or more precisely, a basement of screaming and despair. He was sat on a stool. The taller robed man stepped forward and held out a scroll. "This was found," he said, "on your person." Ethan blinked at it. That's my phone." "It spoke in tongues," the man said grimly. "It glowed like the devil's eye, a device of great heresy." Ethan stared at his cracked iPhone, now tied to a piece of wood with twine and labeled in Latin. The battery was dead, the screen shattered. It looked more like a cursed relic than anything else. "I can explain," Ethan said. "Then explain this," said the second Inquisitor, throwing down his sock. It was Ethan's sock. A modern sock, polyester blend, machine-stitched. "Devil's weaving," the Inquisitor whispered. A third robed figure entered. This one was different, better groomed, with silver hair and an expression that said, "I've tortured nobility, ... He sat ... "I am Prior Malkin," he said. "You are not from here." "No, I'm not," Ethan admitted. "From where?" "America." The robed men looked at each other. "Is that beyond France?" one asked. "Is it a heresy, a sect?" No, it's just, look, I don't belong here, okay? Something went wrong, and I think I'm trapped in the past." "A traveler in time," Malkin murmured. "We burned one of those in 48. 1748? The monk raised an eyebrow. 1248. Ethan laughed nervously. "You can't seriously believe I'm a witch just because I have." He was silenced by the sound of a crank turning. Behind him, a wooden rack groaned to life. No, please, I'm not." Malkin raised a hand. "No torture. Not yet, but he must be examined. If he bleeds from the left nostril when the relic touches him, he is touched by darkness." "What relic?" Ethan asked. The second monk opened a lead box and removed a fork. It was just a fork, silver, modern. Still had the IKEA logo etched in. "We found this too," the monk said. Ethan stared. It was his travel fork, the one he kept in his backpack to avoid plastic cutlery. They made the sign of the cross and advanced. "I swear to God it's just a fork," he cried. "You swear to whom?" Malkin hissed. They jabbed the fork at his chest. He fainted. When Ethan awoke, he was back in the stable, covered in straw. The fork had been confiscated. The Inquisitors had spared him for now, but left a warning. "You will be watched. If your shadow grows longer than your body, the fire awaits." Ethan stared at the wall. Outside, a man shouted that a woman had blinked too often and must be drowned. A chicken wandered in and pecked at Ethan's leg. He didn't move. Chapter 3. How to Die from Bread. The bread tried to kill him. Ethan didn't know that was possible until he took a bite and tasted what he could only describe as fermented brick soaked in dirt and regret. The crust shattered like sandstone. The inside was damp, gray, and faintly green. There were dot threads in it. Is it supposed to look like that? Ethan asked the toothless woman who handed it to him. Like what? She said, wiping her nose on her sleeve. Like moss is growing inside it. She stared blankly. He held it up. See that? The green stuff? That's the good part, she said. He didn't eat the good part. But Thomlin, his enthusiastic, scabbard-bed neighbor, devoured his own hunk like it was a festival feast. Best loaf since Michaelmas, he said, spitting crumbs onto Ethan's sleeve. Might even keep us shittin' regular. Ethan nearly cried. That night the pain began. At first it was just nausea. Then the cramps came, deep, clenching, twisting. His guts felt like someone had tied them in knots and was slowly tightening the rope. He stumbled outside and vomited behind the stable. Someone applauded from the shadows. Satan's leaving his belly, a voice shouted. Hallelujah! Ethan didn't respond. He collapsed into the mud, shaking. By morning, Thomlin was dead. He died quietly in the night, his eyes open, one hand clutching a half-eaten loaf. No one screamed. No one even moved the body. They just dragged it outside and added it to the cart of corpses being taken to the pit. Ethan watched it happen and said nothing. Later he asked the old woman, "What was in that bread?" She shrugged. "Grain, bark, a bit o' fungus. Whatever's left after the rats finish with it." That evening Ethan sat near the dung fire, too weak to stand, too afraid to sleep. He stared into the flames. A child sat across from him, picking lice from her hair and feeding them to a cat. "Why do you look sad?" she asked. "Because everything here is awful," he said. "Why don't you just die, then?" He blinked. "What?" "That's what my dad did," she said cheerfully. "He sawed off his leg with a shovel and bled to death. Said it was better than another winter." Ethan coughed. The fire sputtered. The lice-picking continued. "I miss the internet," he whispered. Chapter 4. The Latrine and Leech. The village healer was blind in one eye, walked with a limp, and smelled faintly of vinegar and sheep rot. Her hut was filled with drying herbs, pots of bubbling black sludge, and a goat chained to a post. The goat hissed at Ethan. "You're cursed," she said, not looking up from a bowl of something gelatinous. "I have food poisoning." "Same thing." She waved him closer. He hesitated. Closer, she snapped. You want your humors rebalanced, don't you? My what? She jabbed a bony finger at his chest. Your black bile outweighs your yellow. I can see it in your teeth. I what? The healer pulled a jar from the shelf and opened it. It was full of leeches. Strip, she said. I'm not putting leeches on me. Then die. He stripped. The leech therapy was unpleasant. They latched onto his chest, his back, the inside of his thighs. They pulsed as they fed. I think one went up my, he began. Don't fight it, she said. He wept silently while a goat stared at him with what felt like smug disapproval. When the leeches were done and his blood had pooled in wooden bowls, the healer handed him a piece of boiled turnip and whispered, You'll dream of fire tonight. Don't drink from the stream. I wasn't going to, he said. The frogs whisper, Okay. She slammed the door behind him. Back at the stable, a priest was blessing the corpse cart with a stick shaped like a finger bone. Someone was screaming about demons again. A man with no legs was playing a bone flute. The dogs were fighting over something that may have been a shoe or a hand. Ethan lay down in his straw, covered himself with a lice sack, and tried to pray to Wi-Fi. Nothing answered. Chapter 5. Trial by Ducking and Other Creative Ways to Kill the Innocent. Ethan woke up to screaming. Again. But this time it was different. Louder, frenzied, rhythmic, almost like the crowd was enjoying it. He crawled out of the stable and followed the noise, drawn by a horrible curiosity and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, someone was finally throwing a party that didn't involve disease or pitchforks. What he found was a pond. Or more accurately, a swampy ditch full of cold brown water, frogs, and fear. A crowd had gathered. Children sat on shoulders. Old women clutched rosaries made from chicken bones. A priest waved incense and shouted words Ethan couldn't understand, probably Latin, possibly gibberish. At the center of it all, a woman was tied to a chair made of rotting wood and rope, hovering above the pond by a seesaw-like contraption. What is this? Ethan whispered to a man nearby. The man, missing an ear and wearing a hat made of squirrel skin, grinned. Ducking trial, he said. She's been accused. Accused of what? Being nice. Ethan blinked. Come again? She helped a blind man cross the road, the man whispered, glancing nervously at the priest. Smiled while she did it. Not natural. A bell rang. The crowd cheered. The lever was pulled. With a creak and a splash, the woman went under. If she floats, she's a witch, the priest bellowed. And if she sinks? Ethan yelled back, horrified. She's innocent, someone said cheerfully. God bless She didn't float. The water bubbled. 10 seconds, 20, 30. At 45, the crowd began to murmur. At 60, someone coughed. At 70, she surfaced, sputtering, coughing, spitting water and weeds. She floats, screamed the priest. Which? The crowd went wild. Ethan screamed. She was just drowning. The priest turned to look at him. A silence fell. You could hear a frog croak. Then the priest said, "Bring the stranger forward." Ethan stood at the edge of the pond, wet from earlier vomit, reeking of leech juice, shaking from mild malnutrition and psychological collapse. "Do you defend the witch?" The priest demanded. I don't think she's a witch. She seems not insane, helpful, literally just a nice person. Fine, he finished. The crowd gasped. The priest crossed himself. He speaks in riddles. I said she's fine. Like fine powder? The priest hissed. Like the kind used to conjure storms. He leaned in. Do you feel the devil's breath when she walks past? No. Well, maybe a bit. But that was probably the cabbage. The priest pointed at him. He too shall be tested. The crowd roared again. A woman fainted in excitement. A boy offered to tie the ropes. The ducking chair was hastily reset, sloshing and creaking as muddy water poured off the wood. You'll be dunked at dawn, the priest growled. Repair your soul, traveler. That night, Ethan tried to run. He made it 2 miles before stepping in a bear trap. Apparently, medieval peasants didn't joke around with their Cabbage Patch security, ... He was dragged back through the mud by the same one-eared man who had explained the trial to him. Don't worry, he said, chuckling. If you float, they'll only burn you a little. Chapter 6. The Ducking Chair. Now featuring screaming. The pond was colder the second time. He was tied in tightly, hands bound, legs secured. A wooden sign hung around his neck reading, "Stranger." Possibly Moorish, definitely suspicious. The priest raised his hand. Do you repent of your lies? Ethan was shivering too hard to speak. Dunk him. Someone shouted, ... They did. The water slammed him like a punch to the chest. Instant brain freeze. Mud up the nose. A mouthful of frog. He thrashed. The ropes held. His lungs screamed. Time stopped. Then suddenly he was yanked back up, gasps. He coughed, choked, vomited, and shouted, "I can't swim." The priest leaned forward. Neither could the last one. Down he went again. When he was finally cut loose, he collapsed on the shore, covered in slime and bruises, his soul freshly shattered. The crowd clapped politely. The priest announced, "He drowns too slowly to be a witch, but he's no holy man either. Mark him as suspicious but unconfirmed." They tied a yellow ribbon to his wrist. Apparently that meant, "Keep an eye on this one." That night he lay beside a dying cow, shaking uncontrollably. A chicken climbed on his chest and laid an egg. He wept softly. Chapter 7. Medicine is just screaming with herbs. Ethan woke up screaming, not because of pain, though he was in pain, but because someone was already trying to bleed him. Stop, stop. The village healer, same woman, worse smell, knelt beside him with a jagged piece of glass. "You moaned in your sleep. You've got spirits in your blood. I'm just cold," she sniffed. Cold is just hot moving backward." Ethan sat up, swatting the glass away. "You said I was cursed last time. Then you said I had too much bile. Now it's blood spirits?" She shrugged. "Yes." He looked down at his arm. She'd already opened a shallow cut. Blood trickled out into a bowl full of crushed bugs. "Drink," she said, handing him a second bowl. "What is it?" "A cleansing draught." He sniffed. It smelled like someone had steeped mushrooms in goat piss and rage. "No." She squinted. "Do you want to heal or do you want to die?" "Neither." She shoved the bowl at him. "Drink or I'll put a beetle in your ear to chase out the bad air." He drank. He regretted it. Within an hour, he couldn't see color anymore. Everything had gone slightly sideways, like reality was now slanted. The healer danced around a fire, muttering something that sounded like, "O great womb of worms, accept this offering." Ethan lay in the straw, sweating and whispering his Wi-Fi password like a prayer. A monk wandered in and blessed the room with a dried squirrel. No one stopped him. He left just as suddenly. The hallucinations weren't the worst part. That came later when he learned the medicine was made of crushed millipede, moldy bread soaked in cow urine, ground glass, a piece of someone's finger. He wasn't told whose finger. No one knew. Probably Thomlin's. Chapter 8. Your tooth hurts? Let's smash it with a rock. 2 days later, Ethan had a toothache. A bad one. Throbbing. Pulsing. The kind of pain that made blinking feel aggressive. He asked the healer for help. She pointed him to the barber. The barber's hut was marked with a wooden sign showing a man holding a saw, a comb, and a chicken. Inside, it smelled like iron, sweat, and defeat. "Which tooth?" the barber asked, sharpening a blade. "Back left," Ethan muttered. "But I don't think it needs to be pulled, maybe just—" The barber grabbed a chisel. "I don't think we need to. Open wide. Wait, do you have anesthetic or—" Whack. The pain was cosmic. ... Ethan screamed. A goat outside screamed louder. The barber swung again. Crack. The tooth came out along with part of the gum and, possibly, a small piece of his soul. "Got it," the barber said proudly, holding up a bloody shard like a trophy. Ethan tried to die. He failed. Outside, children gathered to see this screaming foreigner with the hole in his face. One asked if he was part giant. Another asked if he was a demon. The barber waved them off and charged Ethan a silver coin. Ethan gave him a button. The barber seemed satisfied. Chapter 9. You're not dying. You're just alive here. By the end of the week, Ethan had been ducked twice, had 2 teeth removed, only one of which was infected, gotten lice in places lice shouldn't reach, been whipped for walking suspiciously near the chapel, accidentally stepped on a Lord's shadow and been slapped for it, thrown up 17 times, learned that bath day happens once a year and is often skipped. He spent his days scavenging turnips, dodging religious zealots, and crying behind buildings. His dreams were full of YouTube thumbnails and grilled cheese. He began to forget what phones looked like. One night he whispered to the sky, "Google Maps, take me home." The stars did not answer. A farmer named Giles found him sobbing in a puddle the next morning. Giles sat beside him and offered a bit of stale oat cake. "I've been here all my life," Giles said. "Ate dirt as a child. Got the plague. Lived. Got it again. Lived worse. Buried my own twin. Married my cousin. Saw a crow eat my priest." Ethan said nothing. Giles continued, chewing slowly. "You ain't cursed, friend. You're just awake. What? You're feeling it all raw. No numb left in you. That's how we all started. Screaming inside. Then you stop screaming. Then you stop caring. Then you learn how to kill a rat with one hand and boil its bones for broth." He patted Ethan on the back. "You'll be just fine." Then he stood up and walked into a swamp. Ethan never saw him again. Chapter 10. Festivals, Fevers, and Accidental Arson. Ethan had begun to accept that he would die in the Middle Ages. Not in a noble way, not in battle or defending the innocent. No, he would die from slipping on goat dung during a famine parade or choking on a poorly made radish. So when the town crier announced there would be a festival, Ethan foolishly felt ... hope. Festival for what? He asked. To celebrate the coming summer, the crier said. It's snowing. Aye, but the calendar says it's June. The festival began with a parade, which was really just a dozen peasants banging pots while a man dressed as a tree chased children through mud. Next came the feast, featuring boiled oats with mystery meat, possibly bird, possibly regret. Flat ale served in cracked cups, a single roasted apple that the entire village passed around and licked once each, a pie that turned out to be filled with rocks and feathers as a prank by the blacksmith's son. Then came the games. Ethan was forced into a sack and told to race the other demons. He lost. Someone hit him with a broom. By evening, torches were lit and everyone began dancing, or rather spasming wildly in what Ethan could only assume was a ritual to summon fire gods. A man fell into a brazier. No one helped him. They cheered. Ethan watched in horror as a woman spun in circles until she vomited into a barrel and then fell down laughing. Drink from the barrel, someone shouted. It's blessed now. The priest began chanting in Latin, throwing herbs into the fire and yelling about St. Crispin. The flames roared. Then the hay roof caught. Chapter 11. Fire solves nothing except fleas. It spread fast. One spark, two. The whole festival hut. Really just dry straw walls and centuries of flammable dirt went up like a matchstick castle. People screamed. Someone threw beer on the fire. It exploded. Goats fled. Children shouted that the devil had arrived. One boy started waving a chicken as a weapon. The priest tripped and set his robe ablaze. Someone yelled, "It's the foreigner." He brought hell with him. Ethan, covered in soot and surrounded by smoke, did the only logical thing. He ran into the woods and tripped over a pig. He woke up hours later, wrapped in a wet cloak, lying beside a dying fire. An old man sat nearby roasting mushrooms and muttering to himself in verse. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. The man didn't answer for a long time. Finally he said, "Used to be a scribe. Now I'm a ghost, but still alive somehow. Do you know where I can find help?" The old man looked up. His eyes were clouded. "Help? No, lad. Help is for the rich. You got pain. That's proof you're human." He handed Ethan a mushroom. Ethan sniffed it. "Is it safe?" "Not at all." He ate it anyway. Chapter 12. Fever Dreams and Reality Bites. The mushroom-induced visions. Ethan saw a giant owl wearing a crown made of candle stubs, a screaming wheel made of teeth, a VHS tape of his childhood burning in a medieval fireplace, Thomlin, the dead peasant, riding a skeletal pig and whispering, "The bread was good, wasn't it?" He woke up to the sound of wolves, real wolves, the kind that look at you like you're pre-meal entertainment. The fire was out. The old man was gone. Only a half-bitten mushroom remained, steaming gently in the cold. Ethan grabbed a stick. He didn't know how to fight, but he'd watched Game of Thrones. He yelled and swung wildly, hitting nothing but snow and sadness. The wolves stared, unimpressed. One even looked bored. Then a miracle. A hunter appeared, hurling a spear that struck the ground near the pack. The wolves scattered. The hunter, a woman wearing furs, mud, and what looked like someone else's teeth around her neck, looked at Ethan ... "You scream like a dying goat," she said. Thank you. Come, the forest will eat you slower than I will." He followed her because, honestly, that was the most comforting thing anyone had said to him in days. Chapter 13. The Forest Witch and the Art of Not Dying. The woman didn't speak much. Ethan followed her through twisted trees, over frozen streams, under low-hanging branches covered in what looked suspiciously like teeth. She moved silently, like a ghost with opinions. He moved like a sack of wet bread. Eventually they reached a hut built into the side of a hill, moss-covered, half-sunken, and definitely alive. It breathed when the wind hit it right. "You live here?" Ethan asked. She gave him a look that said, "I don't live, I endure." Inside was a chaos of bones, feathers, dried roots, bottles full of ominous liquids, and what might have been a human hand floating in something red. She gestured to a pile of fur. "Sit." He did. Then she walked behind him and poured something cold and slippery onto his head. "What is that?" "Bear fat," she said. "Mixed with moss, you have lice?" He didn't argue. Her name was Mara, though she said it like a warning. She spoke to plants, rarely blinked, and once stopped mid-sentence to hiss at a squirrel. She told him things like, "The moon is pregnant, that's why the wolves howl. Don't eat anything with more than one color. If you hear a flute at night, run. That's not music, that's hunger." Ethan began to suspect she might be the sanest person he'd met. Chapter 14. Lessons in Survival and Screaming at Owls. For the next few days, Mara taught him how to not die horribly. He learned to start a fire using twigs, flint, and spite. Tell edible mushrooms from screaming ones. Yes, some scream. Set snares for rabbits, though most of what he caught was shame. Carve bone tools that worked better than your soft city fingers ever will. Boil water until it stopped looking haunted. He still bathed once a week, and only under her glare. At night they huddled near the fire while the forest whispered outside. Once something large brushed against the wall. Mara calmly threw salt at it. It didn't come back. One night Ethan asked, "Are you a witch?" She stared into the fire. If a man calls you a witch, he's afraid of you. If a woman calls you one, she wants your secrets. He swallowed. So? "Yes, I'm alive," she said. "That's magic enough." Chapter 15. Villagers, torches, and the usual nonsense. Word spread. It always did. A stranger had survived the fire. He lived in the forest. With her, that was enough. One morning they heard bells. Then hooves. Then shouting, "Witch! Devil's man!" I saw him kiss a tree. Mara sighed. They have come to scream and stab. Should we run? No. We burn their shoes. Ethan wasn't sure if she meant literally or magically, but he followed her anyway. Outside the hut stood a mob of 12, 6 with torches, 2 with pitchforks, 1 with a dog, and 3 with confidence, but no weapons. The priest from the village was among them. "You harbor a demon," he shouted. "He corrupted our festival." "You corrupted your own festival by drinking torch oil," Mara replied dryly. A woman gasped. "She speaks with venom." The dog barked. Ethan stepped forward. "Can we not burn him?" Someone yelled, "Wait, no." They rushed. Mara threw something into the fire. It exploded into green smoke and screaming sparks. The dog yelped and ran. The mob paused. She threw a second pouch. This one made the earth under their feet go wet and squishy, like they were standing in a swamp full of uncooked liver. People screamed. The priest dropped his Bible and ran. Only one man stayed, a tall, thin figure with sharp eyes and a sword. "You're not from here," he said to Ethan. "Neither am I." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Don't trust that one." The man smiled. "Name's Reynard. I collect debts." Then he vanished into the trees. Chapter 16. Bad Omens, Worse Visitors. After the mob scattered, Mara grew quiet, too quiet. She drew runes in ash around the hut, buried a feather under the doorstep, hung bones in the trees. "What's happening?" Ethan asked. "Something's hunting." "What kind of something?" "The kind that looks like a man until it forgets how." Ethan stared. "Do you mean like a werewolf?" She tilted her head. "Worse, a bureaucrat." He laughed. She didn't. At night the forest groaned, not like wind, like memories trying to dig their way out. Ethan woke to scratching under the floor, then whispering, then laughter, soft, human, but stretched wrong, like it had too many teeth. Mara burned sage and whispered in a language that made Ethan's skin crawl. The voices vanished. She turned to him, pale and shaking. "You're marked now. The veil knows you." Ethan sat silently. After a moment he whispered, "Can I go home yet?" She looked away. "Would you even know what home means anymore?" Chapter 17. The Devil's Bureaucrat and the Ink That Binds. It happened 3 nights later. The wind stopped. The fire died without smoke. The air grew so still that even the shadows seemed to hold their breath. And then he knocked. Not on the door. The air outside knocked. 3 cold raps, slow and final, like nails on a coffin lid. Mara stood instantly. "He's here." "Who?" She didn't answer. She grabbed a jar of black powder and a bone flute. "Do not speak unless he asks. Do not agree to anything." Then she opened the door. He stood tall, clean, not a speck of mud on his boots. His cloak shimmered like oil on water. His face looked ... familiar, but wrong. His smile was sharp. His teeth were too neat. His eyes were paperwork colored. "Evening," he said, voice smooth as ink drying. "I represent certain ... interests." Mara didn't blink. "We've nothing for you." "I believe the foreigner does." Ethan felt cold grip his spine. "Me?" "Yes." The man stepped forward. "You weren't born here. You fell in. Through time, yes? Like slipping through a crack in a ledger." "How do you know that?" "I keep the ledgers." He pulled a scroll from his cloak, unrolled it. It unspooled farther than physics should allow. "Ethan of Los Angeles. Born 1995. fell through breach point E12 beta during dream state collapse. Arrival classified as soft entry, Sol, unregistered. Technically ... illegal. Ethan blinked. Illegal? The man nodded. You're off book, unscheduled, and worst of all, unaccounted for. He tapped the scroll, which means I have two options. Let me go, Ethan offered, hopeful. The man smiled wider. No, I audit you. Mara hissed. You'll kill him. Not directly. The man's voice didn't rise. I'll simply press until he pops. Ink, memory, bone, all sortable. Very efficient. He looked at Ethan. Unless, he said, you'd like to sign? Sign what? The man produced a quill. The ink on its tip moved. It writhed like a worm in oil. I offer you one mercy, a contract. Signed in blood, sealed in memory, you'll return to your time, free and clear. No recollection, clean slate. Ethan stared, then at Mara, then at the quill. Chapter 18. A very specific kind of temptation. Ethan's hands shook. His legs did too. The idea of home burned in him like a fever. He could go back. Home, warm water, electricity. Medicine that doesn't involve toads. But ... He remembered Giles the farmer. He remembered Thomlin. He remembered the screaming bread barrel. And the idea of forgetting all of it felt suddenly terribly wrong. You'll wipe my memory? Every splinter. And everyone here? The man's smile dimmed. They're not part of your story. But they are now, Ethan whispered. He lowered the quill. No. The air froze. The scroll snapped shut. The man's voice turned metallic. Then you've chosen audit. Behind him, the forest warped. Black shapes slithered between the trees. Faces made of nothing. Names that shouldn't be spoken. A paper storm of contracts raged through the air. Mara threw the bone flute. It shattered mid-air, and time cracked. For a moment everything stopped. Even the moon. She screamed, "Run!" Ethan ran. Through the door, through the woods, past whispering trees and flickering memories. The world bent, the ground bled, the stars spun like dying embers. He ran until he couldn't breathe. Then, finally, silence. Chapter 19. Between the pages of the world. He found himself in a clearing, or maybe a hole in the story. There was no sound, no scent, no feeling, just presence. A voice spoke, not from outside, from inside his skull. You've seen too much. He looked around. What are you? A reader, like you. I'm not a reader. Then why are you still alive? Ethan didn't answer. The voice shifted, grew closer. The world you knew was thin. This one is thick, heavy, full of screams. It sticks to you. I didn't ask to come here. No one does. But once you're read by the world, it keeps you. You're part of its margins now. Then the voice asked, do you want to survive, Ethan? Truly survive? He hesitated. Yes. Then stop wishing for escape. Start becoming. A flame lit before him, not fire. Resolve. He took a step forward, then another. The world returned. But he had changed. Chapter 20. The Hunter Returns. When Ethan reached the hut again, it was burned. Charred bones lay in the snow. Feathers drifted, symbols melted, but no Mara. Only her flute, whole again, lay untouched at the edge of the ash. He picked it up. A soft hum filled the air. Then a voice. You're still breathing. He turned. Reynard, the sharp-eyed man. Not aged. Not winded. Exactly the same. You knew I'd be here, Ethan said. Reynard nodded. I left the gate open. What are you? Reynard smiled. A better question. What are you becoming? Ethan's hand clenched around the flute. He didn't feel weak anymore. He felt stitched together by nightmare and choice. Let's find Mara, he said. Reynard tilted his head. And when we do, we burn their ledgers. Good. They vanished into the trees. Final chapter. The Kingdom of Ink and Bone. They traveled far, through broken villages and haunted woods, past towns where no one remembered their names, and forests where the trees whispered them constantly. Ethan changed, not in his body, though he now carried scars, calluses, and a limp that sang when it rained, but in his eyes. He no longer flinched at the sight of blood, nor trusted things that were too clean, too easy. He was no longer a visitor. He belonged to the story now. They found Mara in the library beneath the world, a place no map showed. A ruin stitched from centuries, hidden beneath a ruined abbey, guarded by a dead man who read only dreams. She stood beneath a ceiling of teeth and chandeliers made of antlers, alive but diminished, as if memory itself had begun erasing her. I knew you'd come, she said softly, voice like winter smoke. I brought your flute. She smiled just a little. Then it's not too late. Together they descended to the heart of the library, where the Ledger of Worlds was kept, a living book that recorded every story, every person, every breach in time. Its pages turned without hands. Ink flowed like blood. At the center sat the bureaucrat. Unmoving, waiting. "I thought we ended this," Ethan said. The bureaucrat didn't blink. "You never end a contract. You only negotiate a new one." Mara stepped forward. "We're not here to bargain." Leonard smiled from the shadows. "We're here to rewrite." The final battle was not a battle at all. No swords, no fire. Just words. Mara spoke in tongues. Reynard sliced loopholes with logic. Ethan read aloud from pages that didn't exist yet, his pages he'd lived. The bread, the wolves, the ink, the green smoke. Foundling. The pain. Every moment he'd suffered became a paragraph. Every scream a sentence. Every injustice a line in the rebellion. And when he was done, the ledger blinked. It paused. Then it turned one last page and closed. The bureaucrat stood. For the first time, he looked unsure. ... "You've made a new entry." "No," Ethan said, stepping forward. "A new ending." The bureaucrat reached for his scrolls, but they crumbled in his hands, rotted by truth and flame and story. He faded, not dramatically, not with screams or storms, ... just gone. Epilogue. The boy who fell through time. Years passed. The plague came and went. Kings rose and died. But legend spread of a man who came from no village, who walked with witches and danced with wolves, who fought not with swords, but with memory. Some said he was a prophet, others a demon. A few said he'd never existed at all. Only Mara knew better. Only Reynard smiled when his name was spoken. One night, deep in the woods, beside a fire of violet flame, Mara looked up at Ethan and asked, "Do you still miss it? Your old world?" He thought for a long time. "Sometimes," he said, "but not enough to leave this one unwritten." And far beneath the soil, beneath forgotten abbeys and ruined towns, a new book grew where the ledger once lay. Its cover was blank, its pages open, waiting for the next fool, for the next story, for the next reader end.